Our modern Western culture places little to no value on the power of our nightly dreams to inspire, shift, and reorganize our lives. This podcast demands a deep reconsideration of the role dreams play on our path to a more vital and meaningful life. The following is living proof of the life-affirming power of dreams to affect a change and redirect the trajectory of our inner and outer lives. These are the dreams that shape us. The Dreams That Shape Us podcast presents story after story that prove how meaningful dreams are and their tremendous value for shaping our lives so we can be our best. Oftentimes that means healing our hurts and seeing ourselves as we actually are, the proverbial hard look in the mirror. For this episode, we explore some painful experiences in the dreams that help to heal the hurts and pick us up after we fall. Our guest is Erin Amundsen, a depth psychologist, teacher, and dream worker. She shares her experience of an abusive relationship and the cogent dream that summed up the situation in one powerful and telling image of a woman hiding inside a bottle. This conversation is painful at times as Erin and my co-host Stephen Ernenwine air their laundry and speak from a place of wounding they've both experienced. Their conversation also plumbs the wisdom and self-knowledge dreams can provide us so we can be better in our relationships by better understanding ourselves in relationships. Love gained and love lost brings out the best and worst in us. Guided by their dreams, Erin and Stephen show us that we can recover from our mistakes, do the inner work, and love the person we see looking back at us in the mirror. Only then can we give our best to the people closest to us. I'm co-host J.M. DeBoard, and I'll hand you over to Erin and Stephen.
Well, welcome today, Erin. Really appreciate you being here to have this conversation with me. It's quite a pressing issue at this point in our collective. So thank you for being so brave to share this incredible story with us.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, Steve. I love what you're doing in this project, bringing dreams into the forefront of awareness, intuition, and healing in the world. So I'm happy to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we haven't talked for quite a while, and I'm pretty stoked to have another conversation with you. I don't know if you remember how we met.
Yeah, my memory of it was that we were both commenting on some posts about dream work on Facebook, and we kind of got into a Facebook comment conversation, one of those actually rich conversations that don't tend to happen as often anymore.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember exactly how that worked, but I do know that either we did have a kind of back and forth on a comment, or I know I had posted something around that same time of starting my own dream groups. And I know that you, out of very few other people, were like, yeah, let's get on a call. I'll tell you anything I know or anything that can help. And I was just amazed that somebody was willing to be so forthright with how they run their groups and was willing to give me so much great information. So this feels like my payment back to you in some regards.
Yeah, I'll take the reciprocity for sure. And always happy to pay it forward, especially on a topic that I'm so passionate about myself.
For sure. Awesome. So today, to begin, how I've been usually beginning these interviews is to give the listeners an idea of kind of when this was physically within the year. So I ask you, what season were you in, physically, when you had this dream? Mm-hmm. Are you able to remember that?
Yeah, it was the spring of 2016.
Alrighty. Interesting. Okay. And then my second question would be, do you have an idea of kind of what season you were in mythically or emotionally at that time?
Oh, yeah. I guess I would describe it as a resistance to the treasure and reward of all of my hard work. So it was subconsciously actively resisting the harvest
Mm,
of my investments, which is in itself, I think, a fascinating concept to dig into in the psyche.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. So would you refer to that? I mean, it's a harvest, so is that fall time for you?
I mean, in terms of the
Or,
seasons, that is the fall, but in terms of like the season of my life, I had started a private practice. I had momentum and success there. I was definitely, building, and a lot of my dreams around that time were calling me into further depths and
mm,
indicating that I was heading toward even more abundance and success. And, for me, I think that that joyful state of being has been sometimes difficult to not only celebrate, but accept. And that's something
yeah.
that I've been working through. Um, so some part of me wants to keep me safe by sabotaging the good life at times.
Yeah, I know how that is. That's pretty much how I operate as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's hard. It really is, because I think most of life gears us to, I don't know, I feel like we get sufficiently broken down over the course of our life that we have a really hard time when it comes to actually like accepting beautiful things and uh, rewards. And I think we're so geared towards like expecting things to be constantly so hard and never getting a hand up on things that when we finally do, it's kind of foreign and it feels weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to some degree, some of us are also maybe addicted to the challenge of life, looking for the next great adventure. And sometimes the adventure is in stillness, in the moment, in receiving the creation.
I like that. Very cool. All right. So I think to begin this conversation, can you offer us like the lead up to the relationship that you had with your ex that paints the whole situation we'll be talking about here?
Yeah. It was the season of my life of receiving and having built a successful private practice. And I had been single for 5 years at the time. And I think my desire mind just wanted a relationship. I didn't want to be satisfied with what I had. And looking back, I can see that the desire for a relationship was a pure distraction from, finishing my creation at the time. That's my business. But so I was having a lot of dreams about hosting retreats and leading large groups, spiritually and psychotherapeutically. And I was developing those things, and I just kind of got tired of it. I was kind of like a bratty kid who wasn't getting her way. I got tired of being alone, tired of having to follow through on the stuff that I, should do. Tired. I mean, it sounds odd to me now, but I was tired of being in the flow, I guess. So that relationship was going to provide another spark of adventure for me.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's kind of exactly what you just said a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so despite the warning signs from my dreams that were leading me away from developing a relationship, I was so primed and ready to respond to, a line dangling in front of me that it was really easy. I was an easy target, I'll say.
Yeah.
I was willing to start denying my intuition just to have what I wanted. what I thought I wanted.
Right. So do you think, so I guess in my understanding right now, do you think you're kind of flirting with this idea of wanting this relationship more than what your dreams are kind of showing you is where you're supposed to be going? Is that why the morning dreams started happening? Because they're like, hey, we know what you're thinking right now.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that's the case.
Okay.
I was out of alignment with myself. And when I wasn't able to catch myself, I think my subconscious started to give me more red flag dreams.
Wow. So that's really cool. From the write-up you gave me, I guess hearing you talk about it now, it makes more sense. And it's very interesting that, I mean, there's obviously red flag, like warning signs and dreams that came during your relationship. But that's really wild that they had started before you had even talked to him for the first time.
Yeah,
Man.
I was getting red flags about my intentions.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you, just for the listeners' sake, do you have any just brief, if you could tell like one or two of them just very briefly, like kind of like what they look like or how they came about?
Yeah, there's just the one that comes to mind first. My subconscious was still exploring the idea of the healthy masculine and a healthy relationship. And I had several dreams that were similar to this, but in this particular dream, I was in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, on a little getaway on my own. And I had gotten out of my car to walk to the place I was staying. And I was suddenly aware that I was surrounded by violent, dangerous men. So I knew that I was in danger and I wasn't sure how I was going to get out of it. I just kept moving. And as I moved forward, I saw two very kind-hearted, loving, compassionate men who were selling bread. They were selling baked goods and flower essences, very feminine stuff. Huh. And I went to their bread stand and I knew that I would be safe from the violent men there. So these were sort of red flag dreams, I believe, showing me something about my own relationship to the masculine that was wanting to be addressed before getting into a relationship.
Gotcha. Very interesting.
Yeah. So showing me there was like still danger in that realm for me.
Right. All right. Let's stay on the topic of red flags for a moment more. I know you had hinted it in the write-up you had given me that you've been an advocate for this kind of work in the past. And I was curious if you could give our listeners kind of like what some actual red flags in an actual relationship would be like, or what I guess, what are the red flags that someone should look for in a relationship as it's starting off?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. I was just having a conversation with another friend of mine who recently went through this. And I mean, the very first and most important red flag is if you realize that you are denying your own intuition. Not everybody's able to recognize that, but for me, I was consciously aware that I was denying myself. So most important, I think in terms of how like relationship dynamics, like any inconsistency of behavior, inconsistency of emotional input, any type of dismissive commenting. So, for example, if dream work is really important to me and I'm dating someone or I've met someone who scoffs at it and really puts it down, that's probably a red flag. Maybe not that this is a violent person, but it's not the right match for me.
Right.
Right. So any person's outright rejection of personality traits or values any kind of belittling or name calling. I mean, those are the more obvious ones. And there are so many. And I would say, as a psychotherapist, I also know the brain chemistry that we all experience when we fall in love. And it's as dangerous as crack to our system. So we're not thinking clearly. We're not seeing clearly. We will ignore red flags or just not even notice them because we're high. We are literally doped up on love. So one of the practices that I recommend is a vetting process. And it sounds awkward to a lot, especially to a lot of women who get accused of overthinking things or, being too needy a lot. But I would need someone new in my life to meet my family, to meet my friends relatively early on, because those are the people who know me the best outside of myself. And they're going to know if I'm off kilter, even if I don't.
Right.
And I, interestingly enough, I had some friends who had some pretty strong feelings about my ex and his character. And they didn't say anything because I didn't ask them. And I didn't say anything to them because another red flag was, don't talk to other people about our relationship. It's our private business. So in retrospect, I found out that at least two of my friends had pretty significant concerns. And most of us think we should mind our own business, right? So I encourage the opposite. Ask the people you know to look out for you in your relationships.
Oh, I love that. That is amazing, because if you do bring someone home pretty early on and everybody's like, nope, it would make you like really kind of reconsider what you're doing there. And yeah, that's great advice. I love that.
Yeah. And let's bring this person home to your people. It doesn't have to be your family. If your family is not your people, then who are your people? Who do you trust?
So I guess enter your ex. Do you want to tell a little bit about how this relationship began? And
Sure. So this has all the trappings of a beautiful illusion. And I say that because we met when we were preteens, and he was my first kiss. So that romantic notion of a childhood love reconnected was such a strong pull. And he actually, used that as part of the lure, and did it very effectively. So it was a matter of, like a Facebook reconnection, and that idea of a missed connection maybe, and full circle. It was meant to be.
Right.
And it took off like wildfire from there. I mean, it was a Facebook message that turned into a 3-hour phone call that turned into nightly phone calls. And red flag, number 16 or whatever, a very obsessive feelings about the relationship. And that's tricky because the chemicals that we ingest, oxytocin, can lead to that obsessive feeling. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, but for me, I know that an over attachment, over involvement is never a good sign.
Yeah.
And the momentum was very fast, which is another red flag. So, we talked on the phone for 3 months maybe, and then he moved in from another state into my home. And it was, when are we going to get married, and do you want kids? I mean, it was all just lightning quick.
Wow.
Yeah. So the illusion had its allure, and I think my addictive nature, my desire to get out of the discomfort of settling into something easy and good, also played a role. And, this kind of relationship and the speed of things has the ability to take me out of myself, out of the present moment, and very, very effectively.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that a lot. I feel like every relationship I've been in, I've kind of like completely lost my head in. And I think the relationship I'm in right now has been over 11 years. It's been the most solid and steadfast relationship I've ever been in. But every other one that I've ever been in has just been like a whirlwind that I've just gotten so caught up in and totally lose myself in and become like a totally different person. And I come out of it so like broken and weird and have so much to unpack. And so I definitely know how it is to get swept up in that and to not see the warning signs at all, or to see them and like still be so caught up in what's happening that you ignore them and you just think, oh well, this is kind of what I want, kind of not, kind of.
I'm curious with you. You said your current relationship has shifted you out of that pattern. Do you think that is because you shifted something, or is there a difference in your partner's qualities, or maybe some of both?
So the relationship that I had before Erica, it was like a 7th-month relationship, and it was somebody that I had been crushing on for about 2 years before we dated. And it was like every time she was single or I was single, the other was in a relationship, and we always just kind of missed each other. And I thought, man, this is going to be one of those awful situations where we just never connect right. And finally it did work. And I was living in Tennessee at the time, and she was in New York, where my folks were from. And so there was a long distance element to it. And I've never really done too well with that, but I was like so rapturous that finally, like, this person that I've been wanting to be with for so long, I'm with them. And I totally allowed that to like totally shift me completely out of who I am, and got all like worried that I was going to mess it up and I was going to lose her and the distance was going to rip us apart. And I don't know, it's hard to have a long distance relationship as it is, because you're always kind of wondering, what are they doing over there? And all those stupid thoughts like come into your head. And so, yeah, eventually it did completely break apart. And when we did split, it was mutual. And I remember how free I felt all of a sudden. Like it was like this massive weight had just been lifted off of me, and I didn't feel crushed. I felt like alleviated. And I was like, holy cow, I have never felt that disconnected from who I am, that at the end of a relationship, I felt better. And I'm like, never again. I am never allowing myself to tailspin like that ever again. And I didn't jump into a relationship it was probably like about 2.5 years. And within that time, I had like this big spiritual awakening and started meditating and really kind of having a practice in place where I was able to connect with who I am and to live my life from that place versus constantly trying to reach and grab for some form of security or that kind of thing. And so I was way healthier going into my next relationship. And actually recently, within the last couple of years, realized that my whole relationship with Erica, I've had kind of a wall up in a certain capacity where that had served me well for the first few years of our relationship, so I wouldn't kind of tailspin like that. But over the last few years, I've realized that actually doesn't serve me anymore, because I still have like this wall that is inhibiting our relationship from going to that next level. And so I've been really trying to dismantle that now that I know that I can take care of myself. It was like after that relationship, my psyche was all right, if you're all for that, let's do it. And this wall went up that I didn't even really realize went up. And it's been like a kind of a self-defense mechanism in some regards of not allowing myself to get that close, but still close enough to where I can have a relationship with someone. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but...
Well, intimacy is a delicate dance.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that, the self-protective mechanisms.
So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
great. I was just, it sounds like you did a lot of inner development work, and that helped you figure out how to not lose yourself.
Yeah, and the thing that was amazing too was at that time, I'd always been, I don't know, I've never had like a great success rate in like having girls like look my way. And so when they would finally, it was like, oh, I have to do this because I don't know when this will ever happen again.
Scarcity mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I've always been like a feeler. So if it didn't feel right, then obviously I wouldn't do it. But if the connection was there, then I definitely just went all in. But during that time, when that 2.5 years, I had a few women that would come into my life, and we kind of felt it out a little bit, but it never went anywhere. And so for the first time in my life, I was able to go, well, this is okay, but it doesn't feel like where my heart is set. And so I would kind of try to gracefully bow out of that. And I still kept myself open for, I'm in a great place of finally loving myself. And if somebody is to come into this circle, it's going to have to feel fully like meant to be, or like it's going to have to feel right on every level.
Yeah. Yeah. I also have a history of being kind of like the master at yes. I'm a yes woman, to the extent that when I was younger, if a guy asked for my phone number when I was out, it didn't occur to me to say no, or even give him a fake number if I wasn't interested. Just, yes, here's my number. And then if he kept pursuing, I might end up dating this guy that I have absolutely no interest in because I didn't know how to say no.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it was all about the scarcity mentality for me and more about my own self-assertion. So as we're talking about the masculine in relation to this dream and this relationship that I had, all of those are elements at play. My own relationship to my masculine, boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I end? Where's my limit? And assertion and aggression and all of that. I suppose by the time I met this particular ex, I had probably rejected a few, come-ons from other men, but it still was not my strong suit.
Interesting. All right. Well, do we want to finally jump into this dream?
Yeah. So the dream was in March of 2016. And this was about 6 months into living with my ex. And things had already escalated to a level of name calling and fighting. But I was so twisted into it that I was believing that I was partly to blame, that I was engaging in the dynamic. So it couldn't be just his problem. It was our problem to resolve. So March of 2016, I dream one night. Here's the dream. I'm teaching magic to a crowd of people, and this is my profession. It's something that I offer. I'm a magic teacher. And I'm showing this crowd how to bend spoons with their mind. So we're working on mind control. We're working on intention, outcome. We're working on manipulating matter and just playing with it. So I'm just demonstrating and showing them how simple it can be. And as I'm working on bending this spoon, suddenly the spoon turns into a stainless steel milk jug. And I'm surprised at my own ability. I wasn't expecting to totally change the form of the spoon into something else. So I'm now in awe along with the rest of the crowd watching. And one of my best friends is there with me, and we're looking at this milk jug, and we give each other a look as if to say, that doesn't seem safe somehow. And I decide in that moment, I'm going to shift it back into the shape of the spoon because something's just feeling off about it. But before I'm able to shift that milk jug back into a spoon, a woman in the audience discovers her own magic and uses it to shrink herself down so she can fly into the bottle. She does this all just in a second of time, and then she's stuck. My friend and I are looking down at her, and again, we're sort of sharing a psychic experience, shared experience of being afraid for her and also being a little bit jealous of her. How did she do that? And now she's in there. She doesn't have to deal with what's out here. But the danger feels a little bit stronger. So I'm encouraging her to come out, saying, come on, you've got to come out of there. It's not safe for you in there. Please come out so I can change it back. And she simply responds, I can't come out. He doesn't want me to. And that's the end of the dream.
Wow. First time I had read that dream, when you sent it over, that last line just like made me gasp. It's like, ooh.
He doesn't want me to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an obvious analysis for me there, self-analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not willing to do anything that he doesn't want me to do. Right?
Right.
I'm not willing to make a choice that goes against what he wants. And that could be the parentheses sentence in between the story of my life. Up until this dream, but in some ways as something that still plays out now, it's a very deeply programmed as a Midwestern woman, based on some aspects of my ancestry that I'm aware of, and as an American woman, to obey the men, to please the men, to make sure the men are happy, because that's a way of ensuring that you're safe and you're taken care of.
Yeah.
And, it's not that long ago in our history that was just the truth. A woman couldn't do much on her own without a man by her side.
Yeah, that's huge, because it almost makes it more of a collective statement than just a personal one for you. It goes so much deeper into ancestry and just culture, and yeah, it's a doozy.
Yeah, I work mostly with women, and I find this to just be a true theme across the board. There are ways that we shrink ourselves down to fit the mold of what the men who have power in our lives want. And it's not always, this isn't to attack men in any way, because it isn't even about men who abuse power like my ex. This is about good men who want good things for the women in their lives, and the women's inability sometimes to see beyond what the man wants, what he desires, into, okay, it seems good and it's good intention, but is it really good for me?
Right. Yeah, being very involved with a Midwestern woman myself, I know how that plays out in her as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a pretty vivid understanding of what you're saying here. I think to look at this dream first, I really like the way how it relates the work that you do is like magical power.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's super appropriate. And I mean, doing dream work and therapeutic work like you do It is like a magical power that has total potential to transform people's lives and to drastically redefine who they are and how they show up in the world. And so, is there anything else that you want to comment about that piece that touches you in a certain way that either validates or affirms you and your work? And
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Steve. I hadn't, I guess, paid that much attention to connecting that detail. But you're right. My work in the dream is a magical transformation. I'm transforming one item into another with my mind. And I think that is a great piece of imagery for what therapeutic work is. There is no logical, straightforward, step-by-step process that will work regardless, if you apply it right. It is very intuitive, and based in, the more magic qualities of the mind, the ability of the mind to shift.
right. Yeah, it's very interesting. And it kind of creates this contrast because you obviously identify with yourself as the teacher in this dream, but also as the woman who shrinks herself down. So there's this incredible contrast and play on power and powerlessness. And
Yeah.
it's how do you look at that kind of that play between the two of them?
Yeah, well, one thing that comes to mind in a broad context is the idea of the master or the guru or the teacher, and the pedestals that we put each other on. So it is the idea that the teacher's fallible, the powerful can be powerless. The teacher must be the student. The teacher absolutely must be the student. You cannot be a teacher without being a student. So as the levels of expression develop, right, as I step into more power in my work, in the world, then I seem to invite in more experience that informs the depth of that power. So it shows me the broad range of experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It is only through being powerless sometimes that we realize how much power we truly have.
I like that. Yeah, that resonates really well for me. And I feel like it also, the more power we're able to hold, the more responsibility we have for holding it. And I think there's an interesting look here at, especially the way that you tell the story, that you were kind of going against your own better judgment. And so it almost seems like that's almost seen in the way that the power kind of gets away from you a little bit in the dream, where like all of a sudden like things are happening beyond your control and you're like, oh shoot, maybe we should turn that back into a spoon before things get too out of hand here. It almost feels like if you're not how do I say this? I don't want it to be like a shunning thing that I'm saying here.
Yeah, I feel like there's something in what you're getting at is about being mindful of, I don't know if it's the limits of power, but the responsibility that comes with the power of magic, the power of creation, the power to create your life.
Right. Yeah. So maybe in some capacity, you going against that power that you had cultivated so well and was going so well for you, and then kind of turning your back on it, it could create just a mess of your life if you're not continuing to honor it as it's coming through and what it's suggesting you, even if you don't particularly like what it's telling you.
I mean, how many times have you had to deal with an offering from life that isn't what you want?
Oh, all the time.
I'm guessing the listeners of this podcast will relate to that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes feels easier to deny or to lie to myself about the right path because the one that's aligned with me, it's too challenging, it's too difficult, it's too boring, it's too whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I live my life best when I can relax into the path as it unfolds and really appreciate each step and what I'm surrounded by in the moment.
All right. So if we stay with the contrast between power and powerlessness, and you being the teacher and also the woman in the bottle, how do you hold both of those realities, I guess?
Yeah, at the time, it was a challenge to hold both of those realities. I knew that this was an important dream. And I also was waking up to the fact that the dynamics of the relationship I was in were dangerous and toxic, and that I knew better. And so being the wise observer, the teacher, the producer of magic is the part of me that knows better, knows how to trust, knows how to, take action, knows how to create actually something that I want. But the girl in the bottle was also me drinking heavily during that time, which you may or may not know has a tendency to cut into intuition and to confuse the messages that are trying to come through. And I had to hold both spaces. I had to see myself exactly where I was. I was both stuck and having this amazing ability to move with magic through my life. And I knew that both were true. I would say that dream kickstarted the motion that I needed to exit that relationship.
Right.
And it was both the girl in the bottle and the wise teacher essentially walking hand in hand every step of the way. So I couldn't ignore the part of me that was stuck. And I could no longer quiet the mind of the teacher.
Oh, I love that. That's such great imagery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the girl in the bottle, I have to say, as I worked in this dream, was afraid to come out. She was afraid of how big the world outside the bottle is and whether or not she would, find her place in it or be safe in it,
Mm-hmm.
which is fascinating, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fact that the container is like stainless steel, to me, it felt kind of significant. Is that it probably at once feels very cold and alone, but in some regards safe in like a weird way.
Sheltered.
Yeah. Or I mean, that's just me kind of associating with it, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe it feels more like kind of like a cage that you're stuck in. And
yeah, I could say it feels like it for me, the image is like a false paradise, where suddenly you wake up and you realize the leaves are plastic and there is nothing delicious to drink in that glass or whatever. So that illusion,
right.
sort of like being in a cage that you don't know you're in until you suddenly realize it. And then it's like Twilight Zone all of a sudden.
Right. Oh man. Do you have any associations to why it transformed into a milk jug out of all different kind of containers it could have? Because it could have showed up as stereotypical like alcohol bottle of some sort.
The milk jug, makes me think of nurturing. That's the one association, right? It's like the mother's milk or the cow's milk or nurturing, growing. And it also was enough of a play on the imagery. I don't know. This dream seemed to play between subtleties and direct hits. So the stainless steel milk jug was a subtlety because it didn't say vodka or wine or whatever. And yet when I read the dream back to myself about a month after I had it, that was when the recognition hit me. The girl in the bottle, of course, that has been me. I have to stop drinking and get clear to figure this out. So I think the subtlety of it allowed me to be with the dream even before I was ready for the direct hit of that information, right? The confrontation. I wasn't ready for the confrontation at the time. I think the subconscious has a way of delivering things just as they need to be delivered.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It kind of softens certain aspects until you're ready to like really dive into it.
Yeah.
It like gives you enough to where it kind of like makes you go, what is that all about? And you kind of like sit on it for a little bit and then you come back and you're like, whoa, how did I not like instantly pick that up?
Yeah, so this dream seems really, really obvious to me, given the context of my life at the time when I look at it now. The day after I had it, I wrote it down, I forgot about it. It seemed so insignificant that I didn't give it a second thought after I wrote it down. Like significant enough to write it down, but not to do any kind of work with it. So it was one that I came back to. And I've come back to many times. Because there's, it still continues to give its wisdom.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like oftentimes even seasoned dream workers like ourselves, like you'll have like a dream like that and you'll kind of go, I'll just conveniently kind of look by this dream and seems like there's something there, but it's not instantly jumping out. So I'll kind of sit on it for a little bit.
Yeah. Or there's something there that I just don't want to talk about right now.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. I think we all go there for sure. My only associations with the milk jug, because I don't think in your original write-up of that dream you specified it was a milk jug. I think you just wrote that it was a stainless steel container. I've had quite a few dreams with cows in the past, and there is like an ancestral component to that for me because a lot of my ancestry on my father's side were dairy farmers. And the way that they showed up in the dream was like, like cows were being mutilated or they were like zombies, and a lot of these kind of like hard images. And to me, the cow, when I was looking up information on them, it was like this big symbol of nurturance. And I've done a lot of work with the victim archetype, which I think would probably insert itself pretty well into this conversation, being a contrast of power and powerlessness. And so for me, the cow shows up in those contexts to show me kind of like where, like especially in the one where it was zombies, it was like cows being led down into this cave where they turn into zombies. And the cave was like, there were like bones of cows on the floor as I walked down in through there. And it was like this lost zone within my soul of like a place where there was like no nurturance. And it was almost like the cave of the victim almost. And so for me, looking at that and all of a sudden finding out that that was a milk jug, it just kind of brought back all that imagery for me where it almost seems like it's a stainless steel milk jug, which feels very like cold. And since it's empty and there's like no nurturing value in it, but at the same time, the symbol, once you do finally find the power to get yourself out of there, the wisdom that you now hold and the power that you now hold getting out of that situation, that Milk Jug is now kind of a vessel of more personal power and self-worth and all those great qualities that would come with finally standing up and, facing that uncomfortable situation to really get yourself out of there, in my opinion, looking at that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest gifts for sure of the dream and the context of it is the recognition of what it feels like to shrink myself down to the smallest I can possibly be in order to fit somewhere. So that is gift number one. I know exactly what it feels like as I start to shrink. And it doesn't mean I always take action right away, but there's an opportunity and an invitation to adjust or to figure it out. And the second piece is that I know how to get to a place where I can commit to myself to do whatever it takes to take care of me or to take care of business, whatever that business is. That it's like the teacher and the girl in the bottle as parts of me. I can count on her. I can count on me to figure it out.
Is there anything else you want to say about the relationship and maybe like a message to women who maybe are going through a similar situation that you had been in?
Sure, and I could do a whole podcast on that messaging. I would say reach out for support. It would be the top thing. If you are in something that you know is damaging, you know it's dangerous, the best thing that you can offer yourself is someone who understands and maybe who's been there, somebody who can navigate that. And please, please, please try to be compassionate with yourself. I think what I see so often with clients and friends and other women who've been through this is a tendency to really, I'm going to blame myself for being stupid. And that's part of the cycle of abuse that's happening in the relationship in the first place. Then the whole relationship also becomes your fault. And that's not helpful. I think it actually doesn't matter if it's your fault or not. That's not helpful. So having revisited this relationship, this ex of mine, and the toxicity involved in it, I want to acknowledge that you are one of the men in my life that I've met, and I've met several, who are, from what I can tell, you're doing the work to address the impact of toxic masculinity, like the wounded warrior expression in the man. And I'm always curious to hear a little bit more about that. To offer up that, to anybody listening, that there is a dark side and there is danger, and there's also a ton of beauty in the sacred masculine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been a large bulk of the work that my dreams have asked of me, and I've always been a real good guy when it comes down to it. I have my own demons, and they come out in certain ways that I don't particularly want them to. Obviously, I'm a human being, but it's been amazing, like the kind of work that has been asked of me through dreams. And like early on, before I had any kind of like spiritual awakening, but my dreams were something that I was very invested in. The first thing that they really were prodding at was my anger issues, because I've always been kind of like always been a bottler. And so when I finally blow, it's kind of scary. And I'm never, kind of like how you described your partner, I've never been like verbally abusive to people, but my anger has always been kind of a destructive force in my life, where I don't always direct it at other people, but I'll blow up and I'll walk away and I'll carry on like a child. And so I've never hit anybody. I've never called anybody I've ever dated a bitch or a whore or any of those awful words that it seems like guys are so loose with. Never cheated on a woman. So in that regards, I've always come across as a pretty nice guy. It was very interesting when I really started doing my shadow work that, well, when the shadow work switched into kind of doing more of the work with the anima, that was very telling to how my relationship is with my inner feminine. And where as a creative person who is very deep into music and his spiritual practices and that kind of feminine quality to certain things, I always felt like I had a pretty good relationship with the feminine. But it was very interesting as the dreams started coming that were showing me how toxic my relationship is with that part of myself. I was just like, are you serious? Like, what? Wait, what?
With the feminine part, is that what you mean?
Yeah, like with the anima. So for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what the anima is, it's an archetype. Carl Jung coined it as kind of like the soul of a man, and it typically shows up in a man's dreams as a woman. Mm-hmm. And so through relational experiences in your dreams, you can see what your relationship is like with her. And so she's kind of like a man's source of his creativity and his femininity and all of the great qualities that are typically associated with femininity. And essentially, my understanding is it's kind of like all the aspects that a man would seek to marry within himself. So it appears as this woman. I know I'm probably going to get in trouble with gender here, but that's how I'll just speak from my own personal experience. So she appears as a woman for me. And so, like, let me give you an example here. So my whole life, I've really struggled with self-worth and with really showing up for myself. I've always been kind of a pushover and a floor mat, and I've just allowed people to walk all over me my entire life. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I moved so much as a kid. By the time I was 12 years old, I lived in 5 different states and been to like 4 or 5 different elementary schools. And so it became like a self-defense mechanism to be more of like a people pleaser, because that's how I could quickly get new friends and I could avoid the uncomfortable experience of being the new kid and being the outcast and having nobody in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I have a very easy personality to get along with, which helps. And then just being kind of a people pleaser, that helped me get my foot in with groups of friends that were already established. But it obviously, throughout the course of my life, didn't always serve me. And it kind of made me a pushover. And I have all kinds of emotional scarring from wanting to tailor myself too fully to other people and forgetting about who I am. And so it created this massive divide. And the way that seems to show up in my relation to the anima is that she feels completely unsafe within me. Sure. Because at any moment, I would readily choose the external world and the validation that could give me over facilitating my own validation of who I am as a person, as a man, and as this beautiful soul that is inside of me. And so one dream in particular that I'm thinking of was a dream where it was my first look at the saboteur energy. Mm-hmm. And I'd been doing a lot of work with like these 4 archetypes that Caroline Myss talks about, which are like your survival archetypes, which are the victim, the child, the prostitute, and the saboteur. And I could readily see how the other three archetypes, the victim, the prostitute, and the child, would work in my life as far as like keeping me safe. And so the child, you're obviously you're clinging to what you know. You're not moving outside of your comfort zone. You're not leaving the care of mom and dad to be independent. And then the prostitute, you kind of like, there's a price as far as like what you're willing to do or not do to sell your soul, essentially.
I think even being a people pleaser.
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely plays into that for sure. So then the saboteur kind of evaded me for a long time. I was like, well, obviously see how I sabotage myself in certain situations, but like the whole realization of how that archetype operates within me hadn't quite appeared yet. And I had this incredibly hard dream where I'm in this very dark dreamscape and there's like a helicopter whirling overhead, and this woman just comes just running, hurtling at me and just throws herself at me. And she's like, you have to save me. They're going to get me. They're going to kill me. And I'm like, what the heck is happening? And it all of a sudden becomes very aware that the people in the helicopter above me are coming after her. And I realized that I think there was a notion in the dream that one of the characters was the saboteur. I think I was given that notion to help me finally click the dots there. And one of the people in the helicopter was understood to be a friend of mine that I had in middle school named Dave. And Dave later turned into another friend of mine that I had later on in life. And so when I was piecing this dream apart, I was like, this woman's terrified for her life, and the saboteur had something to do with it. And as I was looking at Dave, I'm like, well, as soon as we got to high school, Dave just completely ghosted on me. I'm like, if he's supposed to be kind of the saboteur, then all of a sudden, like, it was kind of like there was like this.
What I'm hearing, I don't know if this is where you were going or not, but it's almost like you ghosted on yourself. You ghosted on your own feminine self, and you prostituted her out to ensure that you would survive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in the end, she's in danger. Like the way that things have been going caused her to be a victim.
Right. Absolutely. And so I guess that's where I was trying to go with it, was the way that Caroline explains the saboteurs. That's kind of like the energy of choice. And so you either make choices that serve you or you make choices that harm you. And that aspect of having a choice can be a sabotaging mechanism that kind of either makes or breaks your life. And so in this dream, it's like I had been constantly making a choice to turn my back on my own soul, just to appease other people and to, kind of win over their validation or whatnot. And now it's clicking that Dave, that's exactly what he did to me in middle school, was that he dropped me because he came across a couple of people that were like a year or two older than us who seemed to take him under their wing, and he just dropped me. Mm-hmm. And I was like so broken up about it for a while there, because I was like, he was like my best friend. We talked every day. He was at my house every weekend, and blah da da da. Painful. And then it was funny because then he transforms into this other guy that I've been pretty good friends with for the last like 10 years or so, and he's like a very spiritual person. And so I had to laugh when it made that connection. It was like, even when I became a very spiritual person, I still did the same thing. And I was like, I had no balls at that point, because to be a spiritual man, you're supposed to be ultra feminine, and you're supposed to not utilize any of your warrior energy, and you're supposed to be this kind of soft, non-confrontational guy. And so it was just poking at that too. It was like, you're still turning your back on your inner feminine because you're not allowing yourself to own that warrior energy enough to create that boundary where you don't need to people please anymore, and you just take care of her, and you don't try to you're still turning your back on yourself because you're still not standing up for yourself. You're still not owning who you are, even as a spiritual person who thinks he's actually learned something. So that was like such a wild dream to have, because it was like, holy cow, like if that's really the experience she's having inside of me, like that definitely has to change right now.
Yeah. Did that dream kind of launch you into some changes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think by that point, when I had that dream, I think I was already beginning to do those changes, but I hadn't quite understand that the situation was at that level, that there really was, that it really had to depict it in that capacity, that she was seriously in fear for her life, like constantly. And that was the worst part about the dream too, was I think, I wish I would have reviewed this dream. I can't remember if the helicopter was somehow blown out of the sky, or like there was something that I did to get them to leave, but there was this fear that even though they were dead, I'm pretty sure the helicopter somehow crashed, and there was this lingering feeling in the dream that at any moment they could somehow come back. So it was like this awful feeling that, all right, you know about this now. It's become pretty crystal clear to you, but if you're not going to do the work, and you're not going to really kind of take ownership of the situation, at any moment these assholes could come back, and she could be right back to where she was, and in fear for her life. And so it was kind of like the dream was like being like, this is your duty now. Like, if you don't do this work, if you don't show up for her now, like this fear is not going to go away. So yeah, pretty intense.
Great dream. I think I find it very fascinating that you started out talking about how your anger can get out of control, and maybe that's a response to having repressed your anima and mistreated her. And I, as a woman, I've had the opposite experience of being so uncomfortable with any level of anger that it's been impossible at times to develop a boundary.
Interesting.
That's what anger is for, right? It is the indication that either you're projecting something on someone, or somebody has violated a boundary, somebody has assaulted your line, right? What you're okay with. So yeah, I had a different, just briefly, I had a different development of dreams that were angry, abusive men showing up in my dreams. And that over time has become me standing up to angry, abusive men in my dreams.
Nice.
It's just freezing. So I think it could be a very fascinating discussion to talk, in a group of men and women about our experiences of masculinity and the development of that energy when we've not been given a solid, healthy model in this culture. So we're having to find our way in the dark.
Yeah, that would be a fantastic conversation. Do you have any dreams in particular that you remember from that time that you could share quickly?
Well, one that was really interesting because it was a little cartoonish. There were these little boys in like a daycare center. I mean, little, like 3 years old, but they kind of looked like eggheads or Oompa Loompas or something that was cartoonish, not human.
Mm-hmm.
These little tiny boys were throwing fits of rage at each other, and it was almost comical. And that was one of the dreams that I had, that I feel like it was symbolizing a transition from me being stalked or chased or yelled at, me being assaulted essentially by aggression or anger, to me experiencing it as something kind of absurd or funny, something I could distance from a little bit. Just watching these little children throw fits, and really kind of getting into the early stages of aggression in our development.
Yeah.
So part of my rebirth in my own relationship to anger.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, since we're on the anger issue, I'll tell you. Yeah, I had just like a lot of dreams that were just like they were like trigger dreams, and like it was like the dream would just poke at something real soft, and then the dream I would just puke all over whatever the situation was. I don't have any ones in particular that I can really drum up, but something that was interesting that was happening in my lucid dreaming around that same time was that I had a series of lucid dreams where as soon as I would become lucid, like a character would just start talking and they wouldn't shut up. And it was just like stream of consciousness and just like completely absurd things that made no sense. And it would actually like, it was almost such a cacophony of speech that it would like take over my brain in the dream and cause me to just like completely lose my mind. Mm-hmm. And then I would just like snap on the person. One time it was my father, just completely just went off on him and tried to like vanquish him from the dream. And another time it was like one of my best friends who symbolizes the victim archetype for me pretty well, because he's kind of one of those people that always has something awful that's happening and can't ever get around it. And so he's in the dream and he's just jabber. And I think I even lucidly created like a trap door in the floor and stuffed him in it and shut it and tried to lock it. And I could still hear him talking and it drove me so mad. And I woke up and it was almost like so many people think lucid dreaming is like all about them controlling the dream. And like you go in there and, oh, you can do anything you want. But my experience with lucid dreams is kind of, yeah, I've had dreams like that where I could kind of go in and putz around and be a complete idiot and do the most absurd, egotistical things I could ever want. But lucid dreams have expected a certain level of kind of integrity and kind of authenticity from me, because I think they want to use me for something bigger. And it was almost like me going in the dream thinking I'm going to do what I want. The dream was like, nope, there's an anger issue that you're still not facing, bro.
You're gonna work on that.
Yeah, that's what we're here to work on. So you're going to have to look at this so vividly, and you're going to have to wake up super disappointed that you wasted yet another lucid dream to being a freaking complete psychopath. And you're going to have to sit there and grapple with all the feelings that brings up, and how you're going to maybe try to tread a little bit lighter on that space the next time you're there. And so, yeah, it was pretty wild. And eventually I did have a lucid dream where that happened, and I did kind of overcome it in probably the capacity that I would be capable of at that time. I think they would have asked a little bit more of me now. But I had the same kind of situation happened, and the guy's just talking. And instead of like getting furious, I just turned around and very gently was like, yeah, that's cool, man. But I don't know if you can fly, but I can. And I just jumped in the air and flew away. And I was like laughing to myself, pat myself on the back, like, yeah, that actually worked out way better than the other times. And then I looked back and he's actually flying through the sky after me, still talking. And I'm like, come on. But I don't think I had another dream like that after that.
Yeah, you did something different.
Yeah. So I think it at least showed that I was learning, or I was trying to learn, trying to find a way to not have that same experience compete or repeat and repeat and repeat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said, Steve, about, doing what the dream is asking of. And I think that seems to be the concept behind this project, is looking at the big dreams and what they're asking of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I live my life that way, and this is not to say that I respond to every single dream that I have, because I don't, but when one catches my attention, if I pause and get into the ask, what is the big ask here? What is being asked of me to stay in alignment with my soul, with my life? Things turn out in ways that I could have never predicted. There's just tremendous growth and opening and connection. So it's not the easy path, but it's the right path for me. And I appreciate you taking the time to explore this and put this out there into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying all that. That means a lot. Yeah, it's definitely been, doing shadow work is hard. It asks everything of you every step of the way, because it's constantly trying to expand your container for yourself, and for just being able to hold more space for all of the aspects of yourself, and the myriad relationships that we have to certain aspects of ourselves. And I think one of the challenging aspects of it is that we're still just this little ego, and to be able to grapple with the immense amount of relationships and archetypal aspects of our soul that we have, it's hard to get them all right. And I don't know if you necessarily do get them all right, but there's always growth to be had, and there's always a new way of looking at those relationships and ebbing and flowing with them. And like for me personally, doing this work with that feminine aspect of my soul has been so rewarding. And I feel like over the last couple of years, really diving into this work, I have like recaptured so much of that essence. And I really don't know who or how I could have continued on if I didn't have this experience erupt within me the way that it has, because it's just, it's soulful. It's recapturing that part of myself that has been kind of locked away and in fear, and that is also so incredibly beautiful, and that I want to bring forward into the world. I don't want it to be in fear. I don't want it to, I don't want to feel like she's all caged up and haunted. And
yeah.
So yeah. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Erin. It's been a real blessing to talk with you again, and to talk to you on an issue that is so needed to be had between men and women, and between men and men. So thank you for being here with me and sharing your incredible dream and the whole process that it helped kind of erupt within your life.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation, Steve. And again, I think this is such an important project. So thank you for putting it out.
Masculinity is not inherently toxic. A lot of the toxicity that we see visibly in our culture is really just a symptom of a grave trauma that patriarchy has instilled upon men and inflicted upon women. And it has devastated men, even though it seems like patriarchy is in support of men. But how patriarchy worms its way into masculinity is so damaging to men. So incredibly damaging to men that we don't even know we're traumatized by it. Within the last year, I had this amazing dream where I was driving through a city, and as I make a turn, my car starts driving in reverse, and there had been police that I had just seen, and they were looking for a sniper in a building. And as I'm driving reverse down the street, I see the sniper up in the building, and you can just feel his anger and his rage, his capacity for that kind of just violent rage. And I'm terrified because I'm a straight shot for this guy. And so I like duck and roll out of the truck, and I run as fast as I can behind the corner of a building so that I can be out of his line of sight. And the dream scene kind of changes at that point, and I'm sitting on a bench now with a bunch of really buff dudes. And as I'm sitting there, this guy comes walking around the corner, sees me, comes up to me, acting all super proud of himself for some kind of, it felt like a female conquest of some sort, like a sexual conquest. And I jump up, and I am just not in the mood to have it with this dude right now. And I'm like swinging at him a little bit and trying to swat him with stuff that I can grab. And I think I even said very intensely during this moment, I'm sick of your toxic masculine bullshit. And all of a sudden, the buff dudes that I was with and like a whole bunch of other dudes show up, and they just encircle us. And now it's just me and this dude in the middle of all of these very strong feeling men that are holding this circle very strongly. And it feels like none of them are letting us out until we hash this out with each other. And feeling the gravity of what is happening, I feel this hush come over me where I had been so adamant about enacting some kind of justice upon this man, which is so true to patriarchy, where, might is right. And when you don't like something, you use anger, you use force to change it. And so I soften, and I want to understand why this person feels the way they do. As I start prying into him and being like, come on, man, what the hell is going on inside of you? Like, why do you think this is okay to act like this? He breaks and he cries and he says to me, I just wanted to love her. And it sends chills through my body right now to say that. It was so powerful and profound in the dream. And as I've worked this dream, I realized that this is the wound. This is the trauma that patriarchy has given men. Because love and kindness and empathy, it's all weakness. You're seen as weak. You're supposed to guard yourself and be distant and be unemotional. You're supposed to cut yourself off completely from your feeling center. And the word her felt like not only the man's soul, the man's feelings, the beauty within the man's soul, his ability to love himself deeply, but the women in the world, in his life, the earth herself, all of these feminine aspects of our life that we have been told are weak to give ourselves to, that we are supposed to be strong and we're supposed to dominate our inner world. We're supposed to cut ourselves off from our emotions and dominate them. We're supposed to be better than them and over them. And we're supposed to be better than women and stronger and more capable and more independent and all this bullshit. That we're supposed to put profits before people And we're supposed to ravage this earth for every resource that we can get our hands on and monetize. Bullshit. We as men need to realize that all we want to do in our heart of hearts is to love her, to show up in this world and to be a protector and not a predator, to be a protector and not an aggressor, to protect our soul and the beauty inside of it and to honor it, to protect the women and the children in our lives and not be aggressive towards them, to not be dismissive or arrogant or just impossible. And to protect this world, this beautiful world that we inhabit, that we just celebrate by destroying it in every way. How can we not see that we are traumatized? How can we not see that we have been led so far astray? And all of these characteristics that are symptoms of this trauma, they are all of the ways that we have attempted to not feel the truth that all we want to do is to love her, because we have been so removed from that the pain of that separation is so severe. Is our way of coping with this deep brokenness within us, where we have been denied the truth that all we want to do is love her. That is so devastating. It has to stop. If you want a path back to your own soul, to find your way home to her, to you, follow the path of your dreams. You can find your way back to her and heal the damage that has been done. Come home.
Wow! Erin and Stephen lay it all on the line. Their candor and frank self-evaluation is like fresh air. They came through their tribulations with the scars to mark their journey, and they are both better people for it. Pain is a driver of growth. It breaks the inertia that develops when we respond habitually. Pattern behavior is difficult to change, and we often don't make changes until the prospect of more pain is scarier than doing nothing. This is the Saturnian wisdom of the nightmare. It's like re-breaking a bone so that it sets correctly. Dreams, and especially nightmares, take us to the places where we are broken, where we haven't healed. They open the wound, and if we endure the pain, we get the benefit of the medicine. And while it's a myth that broken bones grow back stronger, I think that broken people do. I'm right there with Erin and Stephen in that regard. The myth of the wounded healer is the guiding myth of my life and theirs. How many times can I break and put myself back together and maybe come back stronger? This is what our dreams ask of us, but we must do the work to make it happen. Carl Jung said that our pain doesn't have to be pointless. Fix our minds on healing with determination to show up every day for ourselves and do the inner work, endure the pain, and stand firm between the opposing forces of conflict, and it prompts the unconscious to produce a symbol that unifies the opposites. He calls it the transcendent function, transcending conflict and getting unstuck. Erin and Stephen know what I mean, and I bet you do too. Dream work is your best way to show up for yourself daily. It's food for the soul. You can learn from our guest, Erin Amundsen, about the built-in technology of our dreams to guide us to our true path in life. Look her up at naturaldreamtech.com. Stephen is known online as AQ the Dreamwalker, and his music is all over the internet. Music inspired by his dreams that brings healing to hip-hop. And I'm J.M. DeBoard, and I've got an online course for you. It's called Dreaming for Love and Relationships. It teaches how to use dreams to get the love you want in your life. It's at dreamschool.net. Friends, sharing is caring. Please share this podcast and help us spread the word that dreams are meaningful and worth all the time and energy you can give to yours. See you next time.